Good afternoon. If you have your pew Bibles, you can be reading from Mark chapter 4 in the parable of the sower. Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. Other seed fell into the good soil, and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing, and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And Jesus said, "Let anyone with ears to hear listen." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So, the last line of that parable, Jesus says this a lot, and it always annoys me. I probably shouldn't say that, but it does. Let anyone who has ears to hear listen. Because it implies that what was said was very easy to hear and very easy to understand. And I think a lot of the Bible functions that way, that it's deceptively simple. Now, when we hear this parable, I've heard it again and again and again growing up, and everyone portrays it like it's the simplest thing in the world to understand. But it confuses me. So apparently, I do not have ears to hear, to understand, and Jesus just kind of compounds that frustration for me when he quotes that nice little charming passage from Isaiah's commissioning that says, "For those on the outside everything comes in parables, in order that they," apparently meaning me, "may indeed look, but not perceive, and may indeed listen, but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven." That makes you feel a little bit insecure when you hear that, as it does me. And just to make matters worse, Jesus asks them, after he gives the parable and sees their confusion, "Don't you understand?" No, I do not. Because there's a lot to be confused about in that parable for me. You see, right now, I'm working with a nonprofit that works with farmers to get their excess produce to food pantries and food banks and this kind of thing. So I spend a lot of time with farmers. Just this past week, I was down in central Alabama picking squash with a farmer. And if I were to tell this farmer that he should spread his seed this way, he would rightly tell me, city boy that I am, that I did not know what I was talking about. Because this farmer, his sower, Jesus calls him, walks and he throws the seeds on the path. And no self-respecting farmer that I've met in the past 8 months would sow their seed where they walk every day, because nothing's going to grow, especially if it's something like squash and it grows out of the ground. So they don't sow seeds in rocky ground either. That's just not an intelligent choice. Seeds are a precious commodity. Like, this is not something you do haphazardly or lightly. You wouldn't throw seed in thorny ground either. And at that point, once I've heard he sowed it on the path, he sowed it in the rocky ground, he sowed it in the thorns, thinking, is he even on a farm at all? Because this is not what is supposed to be happening. So he does all of this, and despite the sower's lack of skill at sowing, he gets a decent crop. There are a bunch of people who fight about this for some reason, like whether it's a great crop or whether it's a modest crop, but either way, he gets food, and that to me is remarkable based on what he's been doing. And I look at that and I go, what's that supposed to mean? Like, a broken clock is right twice a day? Because that's all that I'm getting from this nonsensical farmer. So I start thinking that, and I think, look at me, like, I know these things, and like, I know what this parable is doing, and it's being foolish is what it's doing. And I think maybe Mark just didn't have a familiarity with any dirt. Maybe he had some first century typos in there, or what. But Jesus takes it one step further, and he tells us exactly what apparently the parable means. And there's nothing like the good Lord's condescension. He says, "The sower sows the word. These are the ones on the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And these are the ones sown on the rocky ground. When they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy. But they have no root, and they endure only for a while. And then, when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And others are those sown among the thorns. These are the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world, the lure of wealth, and the desire for other things to come in and choke the word, and it yields nothing. And these are the ones sown in the good soil. They hear the word, accept it, and bear fruit 30, 60, and 100-fold. If that made any sense to me, I could just stop right now and go home. And I've been read that passage over and over again throughout my life with the presumption that it just makes sense. But it still doesn't help me very much because the grammar is confusing. I'm not sure whether we're supposed to be seeds or whether we're supposed to be dirt or what is supposed to be going on, because in some sense it makes more sense to be a seed. But the parable seems to indicate that we are supposed to be dirt. But then I think about dirt, and that motto, be good dirt, does not seem to be very inspiring to me or make much sense. Because dirt doesn't get to choose whether it's good dirt or not. It works poorly as an exhortation to tell me to be good soil, because soil does not choose to be good or not. Some soil in parts of the world is really good for farming. Other parts of the world have dirt that no matter what you do to it, nothing is going to come out of it. The soil around Birmingham, Alabama, for instance, will grow blueberries, apparently. That is the only thing, apparently, that the soil around Birmingham, Alabama will grow. You go up to North Carolina, the weirdest types of food grow in North Carolina. I won't go into all of them because I can't pronounce half of them, but there are farms everywhere. And you can even buy soil and put it in a raised bed and put good soil somewhere and make something happen. But the soil itself doesn't magically become good. So it seems odd to tell me to be good dirt. So I sat with the passage for a long time because that didn't make any sense to me. And the longer I sat with it, the more it bothered me. Because it's one of those things that I've heard over and over again, but I've never quite understood. But the longer I sat with it, the more I thought I heard something that Jesus might be telling us today. Because dirt doesn't have a lot of choice, but people are really good or bad, depending how you look at it, on doing things with dirt. We are the ones who often make dirt bad dirt. There's some dirt that doesn't just grow things, but a lot of dirt we end up making not good dirt. And the admonition that we might be able to hear today is that our churches might be the dirt Jesus is talking about today. Because we, as Christians, and especially we as ministers, have a responsibility for that dirt. Because that dirt is the soil that our children and our youth grow up in. That soil of the congregation is where our parishioners receive their nourishment, their rain, and their food, and all that they need to grow. So that's when it started to hit home, because I know people who have been victims of Satan's robbery, those birds on the path in a church. When I think of the church as soil, and bad soil like this, I think of children whose ambitions and passions are squelched because they're told, girls aren't like that. Boys don't like those things. Or girls are called bossy, or boys are called sissies. I think especially of little girls who are told they can't pass the offering plate, preach, or teach a Bible study. I think of a whole generation of born-again atheists who have left the church because they were told not to think, and not to question, and not to doubt, to check their brains at the door. I think of those who left the church for mistreatment because they were told that God did not love them just the way they are. I think we all know people who got thrown onto the path and not into good soil. And I think we all know seeds that were sown on rocky ground Do you not know people whose gifts in their passions were not supported in good soil? I think of poets and artists that I've met who want so eagerly to use their gifts for the kingdom of God, but they're told their art is too cerebral or controversial or postmodern for Jesus to handle. I think of youth who were fed junk food theology and worship with artificial flavoring instead of good, wholesome theology and worship. If we leave people without a diet of good faith, whether that be in support or just good theology and teaching, we shouldn't wonder why they leave. If we have been rocky soil to youth through their periods in high school, we shouldn't be surprised when college students don't come back. When people find themselves with no support in their church, we shouldn't be surprised when persecution pushes people away. And I think we all know what that kind of rocky ground looks like. And I think you know what thorns look like too. Whether they're in our churches or down the street, I think we just have to walk outside to see so many of them. Narratives that don't speak to the gospel. I'm thinking of maybe Wall Street that pushes this gospel of success and fulfillment that way. Or big businesses, legal or illegal, that provide fulfillment through addiction. I think of television programming, movies, or tabloids that provide fulfillment through escape. And with all of those competing things to growth, I think what we're left with is a dire picture. But then there's a fourth kind of soil, the good soil. And I think we need to be churches that are that kind of soil, churches that nurture gifts, give people real theology when they're young from the get-go, give people inclusive worship, and provide a place of nourishment and support for whoever is in our congregation. Because it's not our job to question the activities of the sower, but we are the dirt that needs to be good stewards of the seeds that have been planted in us. Amen.
Amen.